Welcome to this episode of Spotlight Grenada. In this installment is the remarkable journey of historian Dr. John Angus Martin. Join me as we explore the profound influences of Dr. Martin's upbringing and his unwavering passion for preserving our rich history and cultural heritage. This is Spotlight Grenada, uplifting conversation. On this episode, my conversation is going to be quite an interesting one. I have historian Dr. John Angus Martin joining me on set today, and I'm so excited to talk a lot about all his publications, but more so about Dr. Martin, the man.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
How's things been for you, Dr.
Things have been good. It's nice being back in Grenada and working on all of these projects. This is the stuff that I love, I'm passionate about, so it's really good to be part of history and culture in Grenada.
Let's start at the beginning. I know you departed Grenada, you migrated at the age of 15, but I am still curious to find out, what sort of childhood you had in Grenada and what would have steered you in the direction of pursuing your passion for history and culture.
From the age of 4 all the way to 15, I lived in Williamson Road. And I think my brother put it best when he said, we knew poetry when we were growing up. I think it was very ideal in many respects. Things were good. We had parents that took care of everything we didn't have to worry about, in a sense. And they created the environment for us to learn. I think one of the interesting things that my mother went to the US and came back with a television. We had one of the first TVs around, and everybody in the neighborhood was in the house when that light went on. Growing up, it was really special, I would say. Had lots of friends, did lots of things all young people did. And growing up in the 70s as well, it was a very active period in Grenada's history. There were lots of things going on. Lots of interesting things, and for a little kid may not have recognized some of the depth of it, but I think all of that had an impact on me. I think my mother was from St. David's. She told a lot of stories of growing up, all of the spirit stories, the Lajables, Sukuyant, and all the things that happen in the dark places, in the night kind of thing. So I think I had a sense of growing up with not being totally in everything Grenadian, but enough. But I think just being thrown at 15 is always a difficult age as a teenager, and you just get thrown into something new. It totally really messes with you, And I think there was always part of me that felt I left something behind. And of all my siblings, I think I'm the one that came back the most, because I said, there's something I left back here, I need to go figure it out. So I've been coming back ever since, and in many respects, I think it's that growing up in Grenada, I think the issue of, I felt a bit different. People saw me differently sometimes. And I think that led me to want to figure out, why am I seem different to other people? What was it about my genealogy? So I started really doing genealogy, trying to figure out where I came from. Who are these people? I grew up people calling me Mung Mung. Didn't really like it. Even my siblings used to call me Mung Mung because they used to say I was the only one that was born in Mung Mars.
Oh boy.
So I knew there was something not nice about it. So I guess all of that made me start thinking of, what was so different about me in that space growing up with everybody else. So I guess I started looking at that genealogy. And the first thing I stumbled into was that there wasn't much out there on Grenada. In terms of history, there wasn't much I could start searching. And this was back in a time where we didn't have the internet, so it's really, you had to go into a library. You actually had to go search for stuff. So I think that is where it all began. And then recognizing that there must be something out there. There must be stuff out there about the history and things. And I began the exploration of that. And that has taken me to where I am today.
The rest is history, like they say.
The rest is history, yes.
Because I was going to ask you about, what would have sparked the interest, but genealogy,
Yes.
popped up. And then another thing that I really would love to know is why history?
I think for me, again, it's going back to that wanting to know myself and not being able to find it. I think that was definitely the impetus. And once I started looking, I realized there's so much more out there. You know, I think one of the things I stumbled in, there was a book called The A to Z of Barbados Heritage. And I stumbled onto that book and I'm like, oh, that is so cool. I could do that in a year, a decade later. And in the process of doing that, I started gathering tons and tons of information on Grenada's history. I've always worked in libraries. As an undergraduate, I worked student jobs, working in libraries, shelving books. I've always been interested in books. And I was fascinated by the idea of collecting stuff. I think I started collecting maybe when I was a Boy Scout at PBC.
Right.
We had to get a badge, and I started collecting stamps. I stole some of my brother's stamps, the brother who had, you know. But we used to go dig the garbage, you know, by the banks used to throw out all their stuff, their letters and stuff, and we would go on a Friday evening and go through the garbage and pull out stamps.
Take all the stamps.
Now we just go to the post office and buy them.
There you go.
But back then you got them the hard way. So I think I always had this sense of collecting.
Yeah.
And maybe when I went to America, I left with nothing of Grenada. There was only one book I think I had, and it was the Independence book from 1974, the picture book that was put out. So it was quite interesting that I got to work on the one that we did for the 50th. But I think I really had few things of Grenada. When you pick up and leave as a family, you don't get to leave with much. And we didn't have that much to begin with in terms of memorabilia and things like that. So I think for me, there was that void, you know, in that history of that place that I came from. But there was nothing of it. So I think my quest was to find more and more of that history and learn about it.
Yeah.
You know.
Let's talk about that quest, because I spotted an interview with you a few months ago, and you mentioned one of the Dutch-speaking islands.
I lived on Saba for a bit.
Right, and you did mention that there's also, you know, tons of information that you came across at a library.
Yes, well, I was about to graduate from high school in the U.S. My brother, eldest brother, who had always been the one to push. When I was in Grenada, he's the one who made me stay inside and read and stuff. I didn't appreciate it then. But he said, oh, what do you want to study? I said, history. He said, do you want to eat? And I said, yes. He said, pick something else.
Yeah.
So I've picked something else along the way. I started off as an electrical engineer, ended up doing a biology degree. Luckily for me, it was in plants. I really had an interest in plants. And then eventually got to history itself. But I think there was always part of me that was interested in collecting information. Right. Because I think if you have information, then I could study that information wherever I want. And it's access to that. Working in libraries and things like that, I've always wanted to do a library degree, but was just never in a place to do it. But I did everything in libraries and was aware of research and stuff like that. And when the opportunity came, I would travel to different libraries and archives in the US and start collecting, you know, copies of things on Grenada. And today I have probably one of the best collections on Grenada's history and culture. So I think it's in the process of doing that that I realized that you can actually learn so much and start writing. I don't think I would have ever seen myself as a writer. But I kept journals for about 10 years.
Wow.
And I think that's where I really learned how to write. Writing is really about rewriting, as they say, about editing. But it's about being able to take ideas from your head and put it on paper.
That's right.
And I think journals allowed me to do that because I had to come up with something to write every day or every few days or whatever. And even if it was just about the weather, about describing things, it really gives you that opportunity to write on a continuous basis and how to pull ideas out of your head.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's for me is really how it began.
I want to move on to the A to Z of Grenada Heritage, which essentially is a detailed account of our culture and our history. You know, what did you hope to achieve when you said, listen, I'm going to do this and I'm going to publish it? And what has the reception been like?
It was my first book, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I just saw the similar one from Barbados, and I'm like, I can do this for Grenada. And I started to do it, collecting the information and things like that. And like I said, I thought it would take a few years, one or two maybe for the most. But a decade later, I came out, I had this massive manuscript. And I sent it off to, it so happened that at the time, Macmillan Caribbean was republishing the series.
Right.
Heinemann had done the first one. And they were in the process of doing it. So I sent them the manuscript, and they're like, we like it, but could you cut it in half? It took me a year to do that.
Wow.
But I think putting all of that together, I felt that I could capture Grenada's history for anybody who was interested in Grenada, especially Grenadians. I describe it as a book I wish I had when I was growing up, that would have really aided me in, you know, even though my mother told stories of La Jablesse and Sukuyant and all that kind of stuff, that it would have been good to know where La Jablesse came from, the word itself, the language,
Correct.
you know, the patois and all of that. So I think that's what I set out to do. Actually, it's to make people understand in a very easy way, very accessible way, the history and culture of Grenada. It's like, I guess, Grenada 101 kind of thing, that you could read a paragraph, even though I might have to read a book or paper to get that information, to synthesize it into a paragraph, that I felt that it was very accessible, and that history should be accessible. You don't have to read this massive book to understand one's history and culture, and especially since we're not the reading culture. You know, in my day, we didn't read that much, and we even read less now.
Yeah, we read
so I think the idea that people could just flip through and get it easily is really what I set out to do, to access that information, and hopefully people can debate that information and share it with others.
Absolutely. Viewers, I'm chatting with Dr. John Angus Martin. We take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to find out a little bit more about if there is a particular area in the A to Z of Grenadian heritage that really stood out for you personally. More after this.
Hello everyone, this is Kurt Knight and you're watching Lexan Digital Media.
Welcome back to this episode of Spotlight Grenada. I'm continuing my conversation, reminding you always that on Spotlight Grenada and Lexan Digital Media, it's all about uplifting conversations. It's about Dr. Martin's pursuit of happiness through history and culture, and his passion for this specific area. You know, just before the break, I sort of prompted you on a specific area in your publication, the A to Z of Grenadian heritage. Is there something that really stood out to you, something that is a bit personal to you, that would have had some sort of impact on you as not just an author and all of that, but an individual and a Grenadian?
Right. There's the entry, Malvina Wells. So the lady, she was a former enslaved in Carriacou, ends up in Edinburgh. She's buried in a cemetery outside of a church in Edinburgh. I learned about her some years ago. Somebody said, oh, there's this, you know, and I was always fascinated by it. And I actually went to visit, went to the graveyard. They allowed me to go in because they were doing some repairs and stuff. And supposedly she's the only former enslaved person anywhere that was probably buried in Edinburgh. So it was an interesting experience, you know, to be able to see that. But some years later, I was reading an article that was written on her, actually, and it mentioned her sister. And I got goosebumps. Because her sister was like my great-great-great-grandmother.
No.
Right, and it was just because she mentioned that, and they mentioned, I'm like, wait, this seems very familiar now.
Yeah.
You know, and it turns out that she was the sister of my great-great-great-grandmother.
Wow.
And it was, for me, like I said, the first time I was able to locate myself within the stuff that I study. And I've done more studies on the family connection, connected with a few people in the UK and other places that actually are related to the people that she ended up going to the UK with. It was the McLeans had owned several plantations in Carriacou, and she ended up going to take care of two of the daughters. So she was mixed race. Her father was white, John Wells, who was actually speaker in the House. He was a big legislature and stuff in Grenada. He was a manager on Bailey's Bacolet plantation. And he's the one that freed my ancestor, his daughter, when she was in her 20s. That he bought her freedom.
Wow.
So it's quite interesting to be able to see so many different aspects.
Wow.
You know, like I said, my interest was always genealogy.
Yes.
Trying to figure out, you know, how did this come about?
Yes.
If you look up the entry on Malvina Wells, there's actually a painting with her
Wow.
in it,
Wow.
with the two girls that she took care of, and supposedly she actually painted as well. Even after many years, she actually may have taken a trip back to Grenada to visit her family, but she ended up dying in Scotland. Her brother is in there as well, who Dr. Wells, who people are aware of. He was doctor in St. David's. He was around. He was in the legislature when they wanted to switch from representative government to crown colony rule. He was one of the three people that protested against it. There used to be a picture of him hanging in a museum somewhere, you know. So everybody, you were aware of him, but you know, then there is her, and then you learn all these other things.
Everything that,
you know, and realize that there's just how families connect,
the connection,
and how history,
yeah,
you know, brings them together, and you learn
Yeah.
all the different facets of history.
yeah.
You know, slavery and what happened between people during that period and things like that.
How much of a challenge was it for you to even find the first bit of information
Right.
that would spark
Yeah.
the whole history, the whole heritage, the whole culture background, your ancestors, you know?
There's a quote I used by somebody who came to do some stuff here, was writing about the revolution. He said, Grenada is a country that's losing its history.
Yes.
Because when people want to come here to do research, I tell them, don't come here. I could send you it in the UK, in the US, in France, because that's where our history is. We have outsourced it.
That is where our history is.
Yes, which
Can
is
you
really
imagine?
sad for a nation who just celebrated 50 years. We do not have a national archives. We don't have a national library. The registry has been shut down, the state of the documents, the building. So I think there's a lot we need to do if we want to be able to go search for our roots. I remember one time the diaspora department had called me and said, we want to do roots tourism.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what you're asking, right? You need an archives. If you want to tell Grenadians or descendants of Grenadians to come back here,
Yeah.
they have to have an archives in order for them to search.
That's right.
You know,
Wow.
so yeah, it's something I've been pushing for quite a while.
Tell me about the impact you hope to have on Grenadians when it comes to understanding who we are, where we're going, where we've been, that sort of thing.
Who we are is created. But if you know the facts, you could come up with better creations.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to know the history. I joke sometimes that we learn about Maroons in Jamaica. We all know about Nanny, but nobody knows about the Maroons in Grenada. We had Maroons in Grenada running all over the place. You know, Maroons who were caught, executed, all that kind of stuff, who did some interesting things.
Yeah.
But nobody knows about them because we don't teach Canadian history. In my dissertation, I looked at 4 characters throughout history, and one of them is enslaved on the Waltham estate in St. Mark. His name was Louison. He was hung at the end of Fedon's rebellion for his participation in that rebellion. And one of the things I was like, the people of Waltham have no idea that this person existed, and their descendants are probably somewhere in the village, but nobody's aware of that history.
Yeah.
How would they react if they're aware of that history?
Yeah.
You know, what would it do for them if you could find out who the descendants of Louison was?
Yeah.
You know, how would they feel about themselves and about their place in Grenada's history as well? You know, so I think it's really important to know these stories, you know, to tell these individual stories about Malvina Wells and all the others.
Yep.
Sometimes we tell a lot of story about politicians and stuff because they're better known, but what's about all the other people? You know, we tell stories about Donovan and Marisho and Gary, but there are lots and lots of other people. There's Chief Captain Antoine, where River Antoine is. There was a Kalinago leader, there were headmen that was out there for that village, you know. Duquesne, you know, the history of that village. You know, we really don't know,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of these things. And I think it's, to me, and there's the reason I do, you have to know about the place where you live and grow, you know,
That's
because
right.
it means something to us.
Absolutely.
And it means something, I think once we learn more about it, it will mean more to us. We'll actually said, oh, wow, I didn't realize.
That's right.
You know, like I said, for me, when you talked about, you know, what was it that got me into history? You can't live in St. George's and not recognize that this stuff has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
We used to
Yeah.
run to the, when,
Yeah.
after they used to have these parades, the kids would follow the police band up
Yep.
to the fort.
Yep.
And we used to go into the tunnels and play in the tunnels. And you're like,
Yeah.
who built this?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
why did they build it?
Yeah.
You know, Fort George is the oldest building in Grenada.
Yeah.
You know?
We gotta know.
And we don't know,
We don't know.
so much about it.
Yeah.
When I go to the French archives, I have a drawing of Fort Royal.
Right.
And I have a drawing from the first engineer that designed it from 1667.
Wow.
He visited the island in 1666 and produced several drawings of the island and stuff like that. The first map of Grenada. Wow. You know, and I have been able to see all of these. You know.
In Europe.
In Europe, yes.
In Europe.
Yeah.
Dr. Martin, you ever thought of doing a movie?
Oh, for sure.
You have? You know, that just came out as for a moment for me.
Yeah. Oh, no. I think a movie on Fedon's Rebellion would be the ultimate. It has everything in it.
It has everything.
And I've spent probably the last decade
Oh,
researching
wow.
Fedon's Rebellion. It's one of the books I'll be working on. I criticize too much the stuff that I see come out on Fedon.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really have to stop
Yeah.
and just put out what I have been doing.
What you've been doing.
on Fedon's Rebellion, because I think it's one of the most fascinating and misunderstood
It is,
as
it
well.
is,
I
it
think
is.
there's lots of things people think they know about Fedon's Rebellion, but they don't know the half of
don't.
it.
Wow.
So there's a real deep story there that tells a lot about us.
Yeah.
You know, and I
Yeah.
think presenting that in its fullest to
Yeah.
people is something I would really love to do.
I'll be waiting.
You know, and I think
I'll be
doing a
waiting.
movie of Fedon and
Yes.
that whole rebellion. I think I've always been fascinated by it as a little boy growing up. Even when everybody was going to Fedon's camp and I couldn't because I was too
Yeah.
young to go. I think it's always fascinating. The idea of this camp up in the
Wow.
mountains, you know, and
Wow.
just the story. And once you dig deeper into it, you realize these fuller stories of these individuals and how they were connected.
Yeah.
You know, people don't always see how these guys were related.
Yeah.
All of the people that Fedon were close to. You know, there's a really deep story, a rich story that just take a hike up to Fedon's camp and you can see, you could almost envision
Yeah.
these rebels, you know, running through the bush and, you know.
So if you were to host a dinner party, and let's say you had the opportunity to sit with, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 persons back in time in history,
Right.
I would love to hear your response.
I've always been fascinated with Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
When I always consider myself a peace guy. You know, I think I'm much changed. Peace is good. Peace is good. Don't get me wrong. Peace is good. But so I think for a lot of time, I just marveled at what he was able to do.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of gaining independence for India.
Yeah.
So I was always fascinated with the approach that he took. You know, I don't think we can do that in this day and age. But I think Mahatma Gandhi would definitely be one of those people.
Yes.
I think Fedon
Yes.
would probably be another one, and maybe Fidel Castro. I don't know if that says anything about me and the
Ooh.
revolutionary aspect that I
That's
think.
quite a diverse group there.
It is, because I think, I guess you're inspired by the people who have done these daring things at this different points in history,
Yeah.
that they put everything on the table and took a chance because they wanted to see something different.
True.
You know, so I think I find them fascinated.
Yeah.
Probably I would like Derek Walcott
Good choice.
to be at the table, because I don't think there's anybody that I know that have played with words like he has.
Yes.
You know, he has definitely shown me the beauty of language.
Yeah.
You know, and just, yeah. So,
Wow.
So those are
That's
the people I
interesting.
probably wouldn't mind having dinner with.
If you did not pursue this specific area, you had revealed earlier that you did do engineering. So
Right.
if not this career
what else?
choice, what else?
I soon realized I could never be an engineer. I did not have the mind for it. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It took failing a few classes to figure it out.
That's fine.
I think I would have done agriculture.
Ah.
because of my father. My father was a agriculturalist in his spare time and in his holidays and when he can get to his garden. He would have loved to do that his entire life, but he couldn't. But I think growing up with him and inspired me to want to do agriculture. He produced cocoa and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I actually have a degree in agriculture. I have a master's degree in agriculture and applied economics.
There you go.
I was overseas in Sierra Leone as a Peace Corps volunteer in agriculture.
Wow.
So I used to teach at an agricultural institute, and I was a extension agent to rural villages on a motorbike in the bush. Agriculture to me is fundamental. I think a lot of our history in Grenada is within agriculture. Self-sufficiency, the idea of gardening and producing your own food. And I did get the degree with the intention of going to do international work, but
something else just tugged at you.
history was the calling, and the calling to self, I guess. And not that I don't use agriculture. A lot of the stuff that I do in history, like I said, my whole dissertation is looking at how Grenada has changed from an indigenous space to where we are today. And for most of that history, it's basically agriculture. Through slavery and everything else that has really brought us to where we are. And it's still a part of who we are, the Isle of Spice.
Finally, what's in the pipeline for you? Because I know you're always at it.
Right. Well, I'm working on publishing my dissertation.
Wow.
Which I should just put it out there, but of course, it's hard to just let go of anything that you're working on. That I think is probably some of my best work. I think I wrote it for Grenadians, even though it's my personal journey in a way, which seems strange for a dissertation, but it's like the title says, we neighbor Stringberry here. Landscape history, representation and identities in the Grenada islandscape. Wow. I'm really trying to tell the story of Grenada and how we all look for identity. Because that's where it all began for me. That search, that quest for who I am. So I think it comes out in that. And the two other things I'm working on is a book on slavery in Grenada. And I'm trying to make it more accessible, almost like a picture book. People are aware of numbers and little stories, but really, I think people would be fascinated by much of the stories that I've found about people and how people cope with enslavement, and from a very personal perspective, even though a lot of those stories were not written by themselves, but I still think we can try to understand more of them if we have some of these stories that I've collected over the years and hope to put out. And the book on Fedon's Rebellion,
and the book on
which I've been working on because I really think it's one of our most fascinating stories. And I actually wrote a chapter in a book on the revolution, comparing the revolution to Fedon's Rebellion, and saying had those guys in the revolution, the Grenada Revolution, known more about the rebellion, they wouldn't have made the same mistakes.
Oh, so all I got to say is this. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. That's my conversation with Dr. John Angus Martin. Don't forget to follow the Facebook page and do subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Lexan Digital Media. Of course, this is home for uplifting conversations, and we will continue our journey in the next couple of weeks with Spotlight Grenada, celebrating everything Grenada and more. God bless. See you next time.
Oh, island in the sun. Look at how